Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and I'm so excited about today's guest. Now, if you live in Ponchatoula, there's virtually no chance that my guest is new to you. Everybody knows Gary Stanga. He's one of the most popular, successful, best known, and best liked guys in Ponchatoula. He has served for years as our clerk of court after several terms as the chief deputy there for his best pal, Julian Dufresne, the late legend and former mayor. But Gary was also mayor pro tem and a city councilman in Ponchatoula long before he became clerk of court. And lots of us, like me, just know him as a local dad, grandpa, friend of the family, if you will. He coached my little brother, Bree. You know, we got a funny story to tell about Bree staying over at his house. He's just a great guy. So with no further ado, I bring out our special guest here today, Gary Stanga, our clerk of court. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Parker. Good afternoon.
Thank you for being with us. I know you're busy. And if you don't mind, why don't we just kick it off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. I grew up out in Beedico. And
what road? Beedico, I hear that there's the road rivalry out there. You know, what part?
Yeah, back then they actually called it Stanga Road, and then they had too many Stanga roads when they did time, so they changed it to Sam Arnold.
Sam Arnold Loop?
Yeah, the Loop,
Okay.
And then there's the road that goes off of it and goes down to Sam Arnold's Landing, which isn't even there anymore. But anyway, I grew up down that road about a quarter of a mile off the main highway, maybe a little more, and went to school at Champ Cooper School.
Oh, cool.
Some of the best days of my life. One of my favorite all-time coaches and mentors was Mr. Albert Levine out at Champ Cooper.
Oh, Coach Al Levine was the best. I had the pleasure of being his assistant in the City League, coaching under him years ago for 2 or 3 years. And he was one of my heroes. He used to take us fishing, and he was just – tell us about Coach Al. He's such a great guy. I'd love to hear you singing his praises here on the show.
Well, let me tell you what he told me and all of us that were playing ball for him. We had a really good team back then. Had David Dragg and who was a really good guard, and Dennis Bardwell played with us, Ronnie Bardwell, Kenny, Paul Dragg. We had a lot of height. Anyway, we had a good team. We won, I think, most of our games, but one of the things that he told us was luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Right. And heard that one a time or two. That's a great one.
I don't think there's any truer saying than that, because people talk about luck. Well, it's really not luck. And it's kind of like Bear Bryant said years ago, and I don't want to make any LSU fans mad, but but I do remember Bear Bryant saying that some of the media had talked about his team being lucky. He said, the harder they work, the luckier they get. So I think that's true in life also.
Right. Well, Coach Al left me and my brothers and countless other players with a lot of those lessons. And you're right. And I remember, I saw it up close and personal because both of his grandsons were about the same age as my brothers. And so Bree and Louie had the pleasure of playing for him. And I saw him, I think, go coach 4 undefeated teams in baseball. And, of course, baseball is probably the hardest sport to go undefeated in, right? Because when your ace isn't on the hill, your chance – I mean, it just depends on one guy so much more with, the pitcher equation, especially in Little League. But Coach Al had it all down. I mean, speaking of, Alabama football coaches and Saban and Bear and the processes they have, it started with getting the best players. It helped that his grandsons are great athletes, and then he would cozy up to the dads of the best players, and he'd usually start with 2 aces on the hill.
now.
And then he would game the draft. I mean, all those great guys like Jacob Stevens that run the park now have figured out this, and they prevent it much better. But back then, he would find a way to find the third best player on his team. You know, that kid he'd say needed to ride to practice, and you know, he worked all these angles, and he would start with maybe 3 or 4 shortstops playing on one team. But then it went far beyond that. I mean, you talk about preparation, meeting opportunity. At the lowest levels, at coach's pitch, you know, if you will, he would have all these different platoons and assistant coaches, and nobody had a down moment, you know. I mean, he was just the best prepared guy, and so much of it was smarts, so much of it was hard work and character. So you must have really loved playing for him at Champ Cooper. I can hear it in your voice, I can see it in your face, and Al Levine was just a real legend.
That was some of the really great days of my life, and you know, flipping back to Champ Cooper for a second, you know, people think about Champ Cooper now, the school that's there. And I don't think anything that's left there was there when I was there, except for maybe the lunchroom, because everything, you know, the old school.
So the campus was different? I didn't know that.
Oh, the old school burnt down. It was a big 2-story building. It had high ceilings, real high ceilings. We had no air conditioning. Had those great big old windows like they have at Ponchatoula Junior High. It used to be the high school. And we'd open those windows up and get some cross ventilation, and that was our air conditioning. But
yikes, that sounds terrible.
Unfortunately, I think what happened, and it was entirely an accident, but some of the janitors were they had a lot of big wasp nests around the outside of the school. That they were using a long pole with something wrapped around, a rag or whatever wrapped around the end to burn, you know, reach up and burn the wasp with, and the building actually caught on fire. And by you know, if it would happen nowadays, there's a fire department sitting right next door.
Sure. And a great fire department at that. I mean, they do great work out there in the 8th Ward. That's one of the best ones there is.
8th Ward has an excellent department. Anyway, it all burnt down. Back when I was going to school there was and my lights went off. Well, my lights are on a timer to save. If I walk out of the office and go up to the judge's chambers, my lights will go off in here to save electricity. So
you hear that, folks? Gary Stanga is saving our taxpayer dollars by timing that light. Thank you for doing that. You don't have a deputy clerk back there flipping a switch just to show off for the constituents, do you? Okay, just checking.
No, I promise that's the way it is. In fact, sometimes if I'm sitting behind my monitor and that sensor doesn't see me move, I'm just moving my fingers typing, replying to an email or whatever, the lights will go off in here, and then the girls sitting right outside my office there, they will start laughing at me, and so, and I promise to everybody, I'm not sleeping. It's just, you have to really move around in order to get that thing to stay on.
Right. Well, speaking of the fire, did this happen when you were in school or after you left? I mean, when was the great Champ Cooper fire that kind of nixed the building?
To be honest, it had to be after I left, because there was no transition while I was there.
Gotcha.
Let me say one other thing that I remember about going to Champ Cooper. We got our milk, came in, they were metal containers with dividers in them, and they were bottles, a little small bottle, a pint of milk with a little cardboard stopper on the top. And you pull that stopper off, cap off, or whatever you want to call it. And that milk would be ice cold. And the ladies that worked in the lunchroom, Miss Gertie Sticker, I'm trying to think, Miss Robinson, and no, Miss Milton, and Miss Allie Dragg worked in there later on. And they would make homemade bread. I'm talking about.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeast rolls.
Right. I know what you're talking about because my wife, who works in the Livingston school system, still buys those yeast rolls once a year when the system sells them to their employees. You can't get them anywhere else at the store, huh?
Man, let me tell you something. Those ladies could cook that bread, and Miss Inez, Pearloo, Lynn and Larry and all of Leo, Albert, they call him Leo. His real name's Albert. That's was their mother. I can remember walking up the road out at Betico, and you could, if you had a little breeze out of the north, the way before you ever got to her house, she cooked that bread every day. And of course, she had a whole slew of boys, so they could eat up some bread.
I bet. Well, folks, isn't it easy to see why Gary wins all his elections? He just rattled off at least 5 or 6 lunch ladies' names he could remember from 60 years ago. So this is a classic successful politician who doesn't remember a face or doesn't forget a face. Speaking of great things being said about Gary, our friend Mark Verbois, who of course is one of the hosts of the show, has chimed in here to say that Gary is a true Ponchatoula treasure, a wealth of knowledge, and an all-around amazing gentleman. Mark, thank you for watching the show again, for sharing that. And of course, we agree. Now, Gary, I think you coached Mark in basketball back in the day, or some Little League sports, right?
Yeah. I played basketball most, through junior high and high school.
Right. And you mentioned y'all had some height at Champ Cooper, and you're a tall guy, so y'all must have had a good squad.
And then when we got to when the Champ Cooper guys got to Ponchatoula High, then we met up with Mark Colway, Arthur.
Oh yeah, good. Great players.
And then our senior year was the first year of full integration, and that's when Donald Tucker, who was 6'7", 6'8", and
when was this? This would be what, the early 70s, 72, 73, somewhere in there?
No,
what year?
69, 70.
Okay.
Yeah, but all of the African American kids that came over from Perrin, that was where they had went to high school at, and they had some outstanding. I'm talking about some really good athletes. So between Champ Cooper, Ponchatoula Junior High, and then later on Perrin being meshed in, that's the year we went to state.
Oh, and cool.
So, but no, going back to coaching, actually the fondest.
Well, because I know you didn't mean to say all these great players, and Mark Verbois had that in common, right? I mean, Mark's a great guy, but I don't think anybody remembers him carrying PHS to the state championship.
Yeah,
just playing with you, Mark.
Mark was a good kid. You remember a lot of I remember a whole lot of the kids that played for me. And I still, to this day, even though that's been many years ago, I will go into Bonings or wherever, and I see some of these people that's grown up. Well,
Right.
I don't recognize them, quite frankly, because they got grown up. They got beards.
Sure, sure.
They great big old muscular
Yeah,
guys, and sometimes I got to do a double take to figure out who it is, or even ask them. But
I bet.
but coaching little conference football was, to me, more fun than anything that I ever did. The
Well,
most
tell us about that. Tell us about who you coached with, your other coaches, some of your favorite players, and because I can tell you
uh,
that was fun.
well, Rodney Mayhew coach. He helped us,
Uh-huh.
and Pumpkin Ryan.
Oh, yeah, I love Mr. Punkin. Great guy.
He coached with me. He was a really good coach. I mean, Pumpkin played football in high school. I actually used uh, Coach Milton Levine.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember Mr. Milton?
Well, yeah, we had Mr. Reggie Peavy on the show a few weeks ago, and he talked about Coach Milton Levine and all the fun they had coaching and taking vacations. And, yeah, he's another local legend for sure.
Well, I actually used most of uh, all the plays that I ran, or that we ran, the kids did
Uh-huh.
in Little Conference, was based off of plays that Milton Levine used when I was in high school.
Oh, that's cool.
And I had went to the fire department and asked them, did they have, how they test the fire hose?
Yes, sir.
Well, they had an old fire hose that was no longer in use, and it wasn't good for anything. So I asked them, could I have a piece of it? So I got a piece, and I stretched it out, and I painted lines on it, and everything to the right of the center, you had the 2, 4, 6, and 8, and then 1, 3, 5, and 7 on the left side. And
Right.
so if you called a 22 quick, that was the 2 back, which was the first back behind the quarterback. If you was in a high formation,
Right.
that was a 2 back through the 2 hole.
Through the 2 hole, yeah. I played for Joey Berth a lot, and he had a very similar system for our offense.
I mean, Joey and I, we were big competitors back in the day.
Well, I tell you what, you out-drafted him because Mr. Joey's a great coach, and his boys were all good players,
really
but he got stuck with me, 0 talent, and you got my brother Bree, who was all district as a defensive end. So I don't know who won those games or who called better X's and O's, but it sounds like he beat you in the draft.
Joey, look, he beat me, and
I mean, you beat him in the draft, I should say, to be clear.
But we won. I don't remember how many years I coached 4 or 5 in Little Conference, and I think we won. I think we won the championship. We was playing for the championship every year, and I think we won 3 out of the 4 or 4 out of 5.
Oh, wow. So you had a little dynasty going there. That's Saban, Belichick level. Who were they? Coach Al Levine would be proud because that's a lot like his runs when he was coaching. Well, who were some of your players? I mean, you had to have some studs out there in addition to good plays to win that many titles.
Well, gosh, I hate to start naming them. Joey Cox, I remember him. He was an animal.
He was total beast. Speaking of Cox, Matt Cox chimes in here that you coached him in baseball.
Yeah.
So you drafted a lot of Cox boys.
Yeah, I was tell Matt I was a terrible baseball coach, and I admit it. But I didn't know a whole lot about baseball, but I was doing it because there wasn't a whole lot of other people that wanted to do it at the time, and
sure.
I just volunteered. So, but yeah, I remember. In fact, Matt coached my granddaughter a couple years ago. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago in
Oh,
softball.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Small
yeah.
world. Well,
So,
you mentioned Joey Cox, and I remember him at the high school level being such a hard-hitting defensive player. He was a great athlete. Who was your quarterback? I mean, who are some of your skill position touchdown scoring guys?
well, I think the first year I coached, Matt, my son, was quarterback,
Okay.
and that was a bad mistake.
Why?
No, and it was a bad mistake because of me. I was too hard on him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because Matt was a good athlete. I remember him well. Tall guy, had skills.
if I had it to do over again, I would never coach my own son because, uh, I mean, I'm so, uh, I guess you would say, driven,
Right.
uh, and I think I drove maybe him too hard. I can remember fussing at him and then coming back and actually apologizing later on because
Uh-huh.
I realized that I was too hard on him. I mean,
Right.
you have to put it into perspective when you coaching a 10-year-old.
Right.
And they're not going to be, they're not going to be perfect. Nope,
No,
none of them are.
that's a great point. And I'll tell you, my daddy loves to tell the story. You remember the late Chris Branch, one of the,
Oh yeah,
true wonderful guys of Ponchatoula. We lost too young. He was my little brother's best friend. And for those that don't know Chris, he died in his early 20s. And but anyway, he was such a neat kid. Always had a smile on his face. But one year, Daddy and I were coaching Betty basketball, and Chris Branch was, I would say, probably our third best player. Louis was the point guard, and Big Rob Walker, who went on to play football at Mississippi State, was the center. And we're maybe down by one or two with a few seconds to go, and Dad calls a TO, and he starts barking out orders. All right, Louis, you do this. Big Rob, you do this. Branch, you do this. We look for Branch. We can't find him on the bench. He's not in the huddle. Look up. He had decided to get a jump on the post-game rush at the concession stand. He had a Snickers and a popcorn. But I mean, you're right. At 9, 10 years old, they're not into it the way you might be. And it sounds like you were a really competitive coach. I mean, you don't win 3 or 4 titles in 4 or 5 years without being competitive. So I get it. And then there's also the angle of, and I don't know if Matt was like this, but I know my little boy's in T-ball now, and he doesn't want to hear it from me. He will listen to his coach, great, but he doesn't want to listen to his dad. So if we're at practice and I'm, they ask me to help out and we're coaching up, he doesn't receive it the same way he does from somebody else.
That was
the
exact same way. I can tell you, what I saw him. I don't know, a month or so ago. I was out at Carter Plantation visiting with Matt and Melissa, and we put the kids on the golf cart. We all went, and Jean, my wife, we all went and took a ride. They had bought another lot out there.
Now they live out there, right? So they bought a second lot in the subdivision? Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, right across from where they bought this new lot is where Kyle Henderson lived.
Yeah, speaking of great players, he was a heck of a player.
Kyle Henderson was as heady of a player that I ever had play quarterback. He was short, and I mean, he was like having another coach. But
right.
He
sure
was really good.
A Peyton Manning type. Yeah, I got you.
I mean, he really paid attention. He listened, and he was all business when he was on the field. So
right.
But I mean, I had Jewel Miller.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Mr. Jewel was a great coach. I remember him coaching against my daddy.
I'm talking about his son.
Oh, little Jewel. Okay, I got you. Okay, I was thinking of Mr. Jewel because he coached against Daddy when Bradley and Louie used to play each other.
He played for me.
Okay.
I don't know. I've still got all the little plaques somewhere at my house.
Yeah. Well, nobody would expect you to name them all. There's always going to be folks you miss, and that's cool. But it's neat to talk about a few of those guys because they're great guys. I mean, the folks you talk about being good players that led you to a championship have become great men. They're great fathers and community icons. And speaking of great players that went on to be great coaches, Kevin Rayford, who's been on our program, checks in here to say that you coached him and he enjoyed playing for you, and he thanks you for service to the city and parish. So Kevin, Karen, thank y'all for checking in. Nobody knows more about youth sports than you guys.
That's right.
Mr. Gary, Kevin was telling me the week we interviewed him was a Thursday, I think. And going into that weekend, his boys had 19 games in one weekend, and they weren't even all here. Some were in St. Tammany, some were in Baton Rouge, some were local. So he says that he called it being sports divorced. He and Karen during season.
They got a herd.
Right. They got a herd. They got 4 boys, so they're never in the same spot. So folks like you and I that have fewer kids, we may moan a little bit about the rigors of being sports dads and coaches and whatnot, but we got it easy compared to Kev and Karen. Those guys are plugging at it.
His pa-in-law,
Mr. Larry Byers.
Yeah. I mean, that's a BDCO boy, and then,
yeah, you're right, through and through.
Kevin's daddy grew up right across the creek.
Great man.
All the Rayfords, and they had a dairy out there back then, and that's Pat Alexander. Paul's wife.
Sure. Right.
She was the Rayford.
Of course, wonderful woman. And Mississippi Paul's great. I mean, you rattling off some real heroes of Ponchatoula right now. Those are all great folks.
Well, let me tell you something. I have been so blessed throughout my lifetime. Couple things I want to mention. One of which is really important to me, and they just had the homecoming at BDCO Baptist Church, and I missed it. My little sister Michelle had told me about it about, I guess, 3 weeks ahead of time, and then I just up and forgot. I just forgot.
Was that your church growing up, BDCO Baptist?
Exactly. My daddy and some other men actually built the first church that they had there for the first BDCO Baptist church.
Wow. When was that? About when did they found that and build that?
I have no idea. I don't
Before
know.
your time, right?
Yeah, Glenn Sanchez would know. In fact, Glenn told me that my dad was taking up money what they would do is they would take up money and they would buy some materials and they'd go work on a church.
Right.
And that's how when they got done building the church, I mean, it was paid for.
Sure.
Pay
as you go.
They didn't know anything, because, oh Lord,
that sounds like a Gordon Burgess project to me. Pay as you go.
Well, my dad didn't. He operated that way all his life. If he couldn't pay for it, he didn't need it.
Yeah, it's sound economics. You don't get in much trouble that way.
Yeah, but I'm blessed. I want to say too. There was 6 of us in our family, 3 boys and 3 girls. The original Shelby Stanga, not the one everybody knows down the river.
Not the Swamp Man, the original recipe version. Now, where are you in that batting order of 6? Where do you fall?
I was the 4th one from the
cleanup hitter. Nice.
Yeah. Shelby, and then my sister Carolyn, who Carolyn taught school, and then taught at Southeastern for a while.
Okay.
And then she started writing those love story books.
Oh, nice.
Like
romance novels?
Yeah, Silhouette, I think she was writing for. She had a bunch of those, and then my sister
Did she
Linda.
have a pen name or did she use a real name?
No, she had a pen name. It was Carol with an E on the end of it. Halston, Halston.
That's cool.
But my sister Linda taught school and retired from teaching. She must have taught 40 years. She lives over around Generette down in that area. And then myself, and then my sister Michelle. Michelle, I'm gonna tell you, she's the best one out of the bunch. She's a hard work.
Michelle, I hope you're watching. You might have some jealous siblings, but that's nice of Gary to say.
I'm just Michelle's a good Christian gal. And she's a hard worker. She loves horses. She's got a bunch of horses, got some cows, and she'll get out and ride a tractor, bush hog, or disc ground, or whatever.
Not afraid of a little hard work, it sounds like.
No, and she's married to Michael John Perrin. And he's a good brother-in-law. And then my baby brother, who is 10 years younger than I, is Brian. He lives in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And Brian's a traveling salesman of the group. I pick at him about that. I think the younger generation are less apt to go to work for, like I went to work for the phone company and I worked there for 31 years.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought about changing jobs, even though sometimes I didn't like it, but Brian, whoever comes along and offers him the most money, he'll flip jobs in a heartbeat.
He's a free agent. He's going to the highest bidder, huh?
Free agent. He's done very, very well. Makes great money and saves. But I said, well, you're not going to have for retirement. He said, I'm saving for my own retirement. So he's definitely got his head on straight. He's got Brian has got a degree from Southeastern in industrial technology and a minor in robotics. So anyway.
Now, that's very marketable skills and education there. So it sounds like y'all had a great group of siblings there, 6 strong brothers and sisters, very successful in their own rights and varied in their interests, right? I mean, several have moved all over the country. Some, like Michelle, it sounds like she's still at Bedico Baptist. Didn't say that, but
lives on part of the home place. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So she's still out there on Sam Arnold, or formerly Stanga. What was it like growing up in that household? Maybe tell us a little bit about your parents, about the interaction. For folks with smaller families, they kind of wonder what's it like to have 5 brothers and sisters. What was childhood like out there in Bedico?
Well, it was like how many chickens you kill on Saturday evening, depending on whether the preacher's family was coming the next day. That's how I grew up. And we didn't run to there was no store to run
to.
My mama went to town. Well, my mother never drove.
The Bonings had not brought a supermarket to town, folks.
No. My mother
long drive to the next closest store.
My mother never drove, so Daddy would drive her to town on Saturday, and that's when we would come out and buy groceries. And I can remember going. My earliest memory is going in the A&P where I think there's the little restaurant. What is it? A Vietnamese restaurant now? Used to be Hemel.
Oh yeah, it's Faux Queen or Fuck Queen restaurant there. Across from the Catholic Church, old Catholic Church.
Back then it was A&P.
Okay.
And I can remember walking in and they used to buy green coffee beans and they would roast those coffee beans right there in the store, and then they would grind it according to how if you wanted a coarse grind or real fine, or if you wanted chicory, they would add that to it. There was no just going in and picking up a bag of coffee. You got it how you wanted it,
Uh-huh.
And let's see, Jerry Rayford's mother worked there back
then. Mr. Jerry's a very special influence in my life. He worked with Dad 25 years, and I'm standing in their old family home, we named our conference room here the Rayford Room after them. They had this house for 50 plus years. Great folks.
Yeah, well, Junior, Gary's daddy, and I,
right?
We some kind of relation. I'm related to the Rayfords in a roundabout way. So
yeah, that's a great family.
When I moved to Ponchatoula, the first time Junior Rayford ever saw me walking down the road, he stopped me and he said, "I don't know who you are." He said, "But you Elvin Stanga's boy."
he could see it on you, right?
I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Because you walk just like you."
Well, while we're on the topic of Mr. Junior, who was a local treasure and a very well liked man that folks knew, who were some other influences in your child? We talked about your family. We've talked about Coach Al, lunch ladies, people at Champ Cooper. Who were other adults that you looked up to or that had an impact on you? I mean, when you think back of the good old days of Ponchatoula, who do you think of?
Here in town or
well, Ponchatoula, Beatico, the whole area. I'm really just looking for influences in your life, whether they were mentors, teachers, you name it.
Mr. Ole Teal, who was member at church out there, I always admired him so very much. He was you talking about a good Christian man. I mean, he was, and humble man. I deer hunted with him and Mr. Henry Sanchez and
right.
David Dragg's dad, Big John, or Andrew and Buell, and I had a bunch of us. We was all youngsters back then. We could hit the swamp. They just tell us where to go, and that's back when we run dogs. That's all we did was run dogs because there wasn't any deer back then. They wasn't deer like there is now in that swamp. But I think when people started going to Mississippi and hit that high land, they gave that swamp up. But there's still probably better hunting there now than it's ever been.
Right, right.
But in town, one of the biggest influences on me, not only when I was in school, but even up until the time he died, was Mr. Buddy Barker.
Oh, what a great man. Absolutely. Tell us about Mr. Buddy and your relationship.
Oh, Lord. I'm going to tell you what he did me. I was shooting foul shots, and he wasn't coaching. He wasn't coaching. He would just come by and was watching. Well,
had he retired by then, or what?
Oh yeah, he had retired.
Okay.
And he said, "Stanga, you using too much arm and not enough wrist." So I kept trying, and I thought I was paying attention, but obviously I wasn't. So next day he came out there and he had a board with him and an ace bandage. And he made me straighten my arm out, and he put the board next to my arm and then wrapped it up with the ace bandage where I couldn't bend my arm.
He put a splint on you, basically.
Yeah, and then he would get the ball and put it in my hand and make me stand at the free throw line and shoot from the free throw line just using my wrist. So
well, how did that work out? Did you score more points?
No, not necessarily. Look, I never was.
But he left you with a great story all these years later.
I never was a great shooter. We had Tom Inman.
Tom was a heck of a player. Yeah, I grew up hearing Andy Edwards tell me about how great Tom was. Been hearing that my whole life.
Tom was good. David Dragg, he could knock the bottom out of the net. Mark Cowell, you put him in the corner.
Yeah.
If they didn't get on him quick when the ball went to the corner, you might as well start running to the other end because it was going to be points. He was a good shot. And then we had Big Arthur. He was good. I got to play pretty much all the time. Defense. That was my forte.
You were the stopper.
I didn't make the 4, 5, 6, 8 points in a good game or whatever. I don't know what the most I ever scored. Wasn't that many, but I got to play because of playing defense and rebound.
Yeah.
Back then, I could take a volleyball. I couldn't because I couldn't palm a basketball, but I could take a volleyball and stand flat-footed under the goal and jump up and dunk it.
Wow.
But now
that was probably before they started measuring vertical leap and stuff. So you probably don't remember what your vertical was, do you?
Oh no, we didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't do all that. We was playing Jane. We didn't do all that fancy stuff. But anyway, it was. I had a lot of, I guess, good influences. Coach Milton Levine.
Right.
Like I said, I remember him from my when I very first got out there, and then later on in life, not a lot later on because I was still young, but I got to play in golf, and I would play with Coach Levine and Bobby Lee and Mr. Dennis Abair's brother from Springfield.
Okay.
I can't think of his first name. And anyway, they Wayne LeBourgeois. There was about probably 10, 11, 12 of us. It was at least 3 foursomes and sometimes more. Sometimes we have an odd threesome behind, whatever.
Did y'all play at Oak Knoll and Hammond mostly, or where'd y'all go?
We played at Oak Knoll.
Okay.
And then every now and then we drive up to Mississippi and play at Percy Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
And then every summer for years, we would, Darrell Adams, he would go with us. We'd go to over to the Gulf Coast, and the ladies would shop and lay on the beach and stuff, and the guys, we would play a different course every day because there was a plethora of golf courses over there, And,
yeah, there's great golfing on the coast. I grew up following my daddy around those courses, man. Beautiful.
Yeah, Coach Levine would.
Yeah, great golfing. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. You've got some folks chiming in here. Rosemary Gardner says that she loves you. PHS proud. Miss Faye Ivaninsky. Oh, I'm sorry. One of our best listeners says you're a wonderful clerk of court. Speaking of wonderful clerks of court and influences in your life, tell us about your dear friend Julian Dufresh and what he meant to you. And let's just talk about and celebrate Julian because was such a great man and such a great Ponchatoula story there.
Well, I'm gonna back up and say that in during my tenure with the phone company at the same time, in 1976, I ran for the city council and got elected, and then so did Julian. And we served on the council together. We were instrumental in getting the town divided. Prior to, there was a lot of places all over the country, and I think even maybe Hammond had a lawsuit to make them, go to single member districts to allow the opportunity to have minority representation. Well, in Ponchatoula, we did it ahead of ever being forced to do it. We did it voluntarily. And
you and Julian led the charge in that effort, it sounds like.
Yeah, and we anyway, we worked together, and then he got elected mayor, and then I was still on the council. He and I, that's what made it so hard on me when he passed. I'm gonna tell you, I mean, losing my parents naturally was a tough thing.
I bet.
But when Julian passed, I was absolutely devastated, because forget about politics, forget about it altogether. We had been friends for close to 50 years, and
right.
and because I knew him from high school, and we fished together. We used to go fly fishing down the canal, because we could leave his house at 6 or 6:30 in the afternoon and go down there and fly fish for an hour and a half or whatever till dark, and then we hunted together. We ended up Julian and his brother Danny, and let's see, it was Frank Vallow, myself, and Tom Waterman. We bought a piece of property in
y'all had a place together, I remember. Yeah.
Tom came up there one time, and he reminded me of the movie Vacation when Chevy Chase looked at the Grand Canyon. He went,
Tommy, of course, is a dear friend of my family, and he's like an uncle to me. And he's a great investor, a great businessman, but not much of a hunter. That wasn't his jam.
No, he and Brian DePaula came together, and Tom said, I took him for a ride around we had roads that kind of went around all the way around the outside of the property. And he said, oh, it's beautiful up in here. We got back and he said, let me get something to drink, Brian. We're going to go. That was the only time he ever came. And then after he passed, Janice was a co-owner. Naturally, she didn't deer hunt. And then what was it, last year or year before, Janice, and then Julian had passed, so Janet had his part. And, they wanted to get out.
I bet,
wanted to get out. So we ended up selling the place. But anyway, it was a place that it was, after the Julian died in the first part of January, and then if I remember correctly, and then around the end of January, I went up there after he had passed to the camp, and I was up there by myself. I unloaded all my stuff. I went to camp. I was sitting there. I was waiting to go hunting, and went and got on a stand, and I sat there that afternoon, and all I could think about was him not being there.
Yeah. Must have been so tough. Y'all were so close. And like you say, for 50 years. I mean, this wasn't.
I came back. I loaded my stuff back to the truck, and I came home.
Yeah.
It just wasn't the same.
Yeah.
And anybody that knew Julian, I mean, he was a mess. Okay, I mean, he was, you know, he was just a mess, and he was funny. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, my wife always said that he reminded her of Chevy Chase for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, speaking of the devil, look at this. We've got a message here from Miss Jean, and you got a message. It says, Hallie and Mila say hey.
Oh, hey, y'all.
They must be watching. Thank y'all for tuning in. And then we got a hey, Pawpaw. So
That's
look at those beautiful grandkids of yours. They're
Yeah,
watching you in action.
I love them to death. I tell you.
Tell us about them. And since they are watching, let's start with tell us a little bit about their daddy. We've talked about coaching and brushed up on fatherhood, coaching, Matt.
Well,
Tell us about, your the next stage of your life after childhood, and besides work and all that, marrying your wonderful wife and raising kid. Like, tell us about that chapter in your life.
yeah, on the 24th of this month, Gene and I be married 49 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
So we got
Miss Jane, I'm going to lobby for you here. Gary, it's time to buy something really nice. I'm not going to mess up and tell you what it is. I'm just saying spend a lot. She's worth it.
Let me say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I can't afford what she deserves.
I believe that. I know you got a good job and a nice income, but she deserves, millions.
I'm serious when I say that, because she, when Hallie is 11. When Hallie was born, Jean said she said she was working at North Oaks at the time. She said, "I'm quitting." I said,
full-time grandma.
She said, "I'm gonna take care of that baby when Melissa goes back to work." I said, because at the time Melissa was working in New Orleans, and so I said, "Okay." So she kept Hallie every day, changed diapers, fed her, did everything in the world. They both. She's Nana to both of them. And that's what they call.
Melissa says you're probably a better pawpaw than coach.
Well, I try to be. Very proud of my son. Let me say that.
As you should be. Matt's such a great guy.
Too. I mean, but Matt, I can tell you one thing I didn't teach him. I didn't teach him how to be a good student. And
he found that on his own.
I know. I don't know where this made him fall out at, but he had a 4.3 grade average when he graduated from Ponchatoula.
Wow.
And then he was on the dean's
I think it's clear the credit goes to Miss Jean. I mean, that's it's no great mystery, Gary, if it wasn't you.
That wasn't me, I can tell you. I was a terrible student. I had a lot of fun, and but I wasn't the best student in the world. But
so kids, if you're watching, young folks, hey, I want y'all to do your best and make the best grade you can. But Gary's a good example of the success you can have, even if you don't have a 4.3 like Matt. So hang in there, keep working hard, being good to people, and good results will follow.
I think Matt was pretty much on the dean's list every semester. And he, the plan was for him. I think his majors like biology or whatever. He was going to go to med school, and a couple things. Well, we would talk to a lot of people, doctors, and they was advising against going into the medical field, because they said you create such a debt, going to medical school that
oh yeah, the student loans required to pull that off are, tremendous. Yeah, it's a mountain of debt.
You spend a better part of the rest of your life trying to pay off all all the debts. But
Right.
anyway, about the same time he was weighing all of these, what he was going to do and all that, he got contacted by a headhunter that asked him if he would consider going to work in the petrochemical industry. And Matt said, depends on what it's doing. So it was working in a laboratory for Dow. So he went to work. Actually, I think when you first go to work, Dow hires everyone through a like a private contracting service, so that if you don't work out, they can just say, well, look, don't send them back.
Right.
But Matt got hired and as a Dow employee, and he had a really good boss. Wasn't long. He made supervisor over one of the labs, and since then, I keep asking him what he does, and I can't get a straight answer. His
The
title,
tougher it is to understand, the more proof of how smart he is, right?
his title is Senior Analytical Technologist.
Sounds to me like maybe he's in the CIA. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that. If I'm not here tomorrow, you'll know I was right. But that
kind of sounds like a consultant. But anyway,
that's funny.
He does well. And then Melissa, as you well know, went to work for Jana King.
Yeah, she's a wonderful woman. She's very successful, very bright, beautiful. She must be a great daughter-in-law.
What she is, and the best negotiator you'll ever see.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, pretty much anything. If I want to buy something major or whatever, I get Melissa to do the negotiating for me, because she's tough.
Yeah.
You're not going to sell her something for what she asked for.
Right.
So,
well, I know, the Inman's Chance is one of my best buds, and I know how happy they've been with her work over the years. And Angelique Richardson, who worked with Melissa for years, was always so high on her. So I know she's a tough negotiator, like you say, a brilliant woman, but she's just down to earth and fun to be around too. She's a great girl.
I want to mention one more thing before time gets away from us.
Yeah, please do.
Back years ago, and it made me proud when Matt said this to me one day. He said, Daddy, he said, the best thing that you ever did, or y'all ever did, was that park out there. Talking about park.
Oh, yeah. Amen. You and Julian and everybody involved did a great job to get that thing done.
I had actually brought it up at a council meeting one night, saying that we can no longer, the city can't provide the services that we need to provide. I said, we have to do something. And Julian, I give Julian all the credit in the world, as far as he did a lot of the legwork, because at the time I was still working for the phone company. He was mayor. He could kind of had time to make the phone call.
Yeah, he was more full time. You were more part time, I guess.
And anyway, I can remember we went and looked at one tract of land, and both of us agreed, no, this is not it.
Yeah.
And then we got a call about going to look at. David Peavy called us. He said, I got this tract of land I want y'all to look at. He said, but we got a small problem. So we go out, look at it, and it was half Mr. Dodalow's property, and well, over half. But part of it was Mr. King's problem.
Okay.
I mean, King's property. Well, the two of them didn't get along too good, because their property butted up, and they had
right, yeah,
cows and whatnot.
Sure.
And David said, I got to try to negotiate this thing to where one of them doesn't know what's going on. So anyway,
The prices, you had to have to do a blind bid or something. Keep everybody happy.
He did spill the beans to Mr. King, and Mr. King said, I'll sell it to you. He said, the only thing I want y'all to do is, he said, promise me that you're going to build a little playground. And we did. The first one that we built, which is up in the front, when, you know, driving in, is King's. If you notice, that's King's. And the other thing I want to mention real quick, the inscription on the flagpole. If you've ever noticed, there's a granite marker at the bottom of the flagpole, and it's got an inscription on it. Well, I was in the Lions Club, and I had talked to them about, you know, buying something to put by the flagpole marker. And so I went to bed one night. I woke up during the middle of the night, and I woke Jean up. It must have been like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I got it. And she said, you got what? I said, I have the inscription that needs to go on that stone. And she said, well, you better get up and write it down. I said, no, I'll remember it. And sure enough, I got up the next morning. I didn't remember waking her up, but I remembered the inscription. And it's a tribute to the people who fought and died for the country that allow us to utilize a facility like that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So you did remember. Thank God. You'd have heard about it if you'd forgotten, right?
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Well, that park, you know, as a dad whose kids playing t-ball out there, I can tell you are so right about how essential that park has been to Ponchatoula and our quality of life. And it's easy to look at now. Hammond's got Chapapila, and that's a great park too. And just think of these kind of facilities as a given. But you and Julian and the other folks that made it happen were way ahead of your time, and it was pretty groundbreaking. You know, now Ponchatoula, let's face it, this city's kind of rich with tax dollars. You know, we have probably more money than we need, actually. You know, thanks to Walmart, Racetrack, Rouse's, all these big businesses that have come to town. You and Julian didn't have that, right? I mean, y'all were on a shoestring budget.
It was tough times back then, Parker.
Yeah, I bet. I don't think people get that, you know, and y'all did a great job laying it out. And credit's due to the people that are there now. I mentioned Jacob Stevens earlier. He and his team do a great job. I mean, they're hustling. Dr. Bill Wheat did so much. I mean, y'all passed the torch to folks that took it and ran, and they're kicking butt.
Did a fantastic job.
Amen.
And all the other people that were on the committee, but Bill, you know, I mean, when he was chairman, he really kept the ship moving forward, and it's grown beyond what I even imagined that it would ever be, to be honest with you. You know?
Yeah.
And it warms my heart every time I go out there. It's a great thing. One other thing I wanted to mention too was, you know, back in the day, you talk about being short of money. We could hardly ever give employees and raises and especially policemen and firemen, for whatever reason. We would hire people with the police department. We'd send them over to Baton Rouge for their training, and then as soon as they got back, your daddy would hire them away from them.
Right. I remember. Didn't y'all have a clause where they had to pay you back their post-certification fee if they didn't stay a certain amount?
We was fairly slow. It took us a while to figure that out. But one of the things that I did was Miss Ruby Landry. That's when she was still city clerk. I got with her son, who was working at Gary Bank, and I got him to run some numbers for me on a millage, on that 10 mil tax for the police and firemen.
Okay.
I brought that up and was able to get the council to go along with it. Well, then naturally we had to sell to people, but
Sure.
people in Ponchatoula has been my experience. They will, if you're spending the money like you're supposed to be spending it, and
Right.
doing the things that you say you're going to do, they will support you. And
I think you're right. I mean, the people here will step up and do what they need to do if you're doing your part in honoring that public trust. And y'all
anyway,
did.
We passed that 10 mil tax, and that allowed the police and the fire departments to have, they had a schedule set up, okay?
Yeah.
For the length of the proposition. And it showed, it was by, it didn't have names actually plugged in, but it was by, you know, like just a patrolman,
by rank,
a sergeant, you know, right on up. And then, of course, we didn't have a whole lot of people back then either.
Sure.
You know, police department was fairly small, but it allowed those people to see, I'm gonna get this much money this year, and I'm gonna be guaranteed this much the next year, and they could look right on out. And I think I would like to think that attributed to us being able to hold on to some. Yeah,
to keep some talent that might have bolted if they hadn't seen that upward trajectory. That's a great point. Well, Gary, I thank you so much for being here. We've been here an hour, and I'm gonna, before we close down, I want to share a few more quotes of people who are saying nice things about you. Sid Harris says it's a wonderful program. These are great memories that you're sharing. Irvin Prevost says you're such a sweet person. Good to see you there, Wayne. Hadn't seen you in a while. Good old high school buddy of mine. And Rachel Lagarde Strohmeyer says that you're a great guy, and she remembers you from the city hall days when you were a councilman, and you've always been dedicated to serving the people. And it's like the old saying, it takes one to know one, because I know Rachel does so much service to the community, right? I mean,
she was a student worker, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
At City Hall first. And
great family, the Lagarde family, great family. As the Strohmeyer family, which she married into too. Her sister and I were classmates. Rhonda was wonderful. Their parents are such sweet folks. And I
remember her husband when he played football.
Yeah, those Strohmeyer boys were players. They were tough. You mentioned earlier, big, strong, muscle-bound men. They were, man. Well, Gary, we thank you for your time. Before we close out, is there anything else on your mind, on your heart? Just anything you'd like to share with the people of Ponchatoula? We've loved getting to know you a little better this last hour, but we'd love, if you have a parting shot, please share it.
This hour went by so fast, I can't.
Well, look, we'll get you back because I know there's much more. So we'll circle back in a year or some time period if you have time, because it's been fun getting to know more about you, and we just scratched the surface. I know there's a lot. We didn't even get to the story about Bree staying at your house for a week. Spoiler alert.
Oh, Bree.
Yeah, Bree. Yeah, my brother.
Said Bree.
I'm sorry.
But we'll get to that next time.
We'll get to that next time. But Gary, thank you for your time. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Thanks. I can see many of you stuck with us the whole hour plus, and we appreciate that. We'll be back next Thursday, and we have a local State Farm agent, Benton Timms. He'll be here to talk to us about his service at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So this will be a really remarkable hour. We'll get to hear about one of America's great institutions and get some insight that folks just don't normally get access to. So thank you so much. Y'all have a great day. And Gary, it was great chatting with you. Take care.
Thank you.